Northern Ireland, a small step to a giant adventure. Book your next giant adventure at discovernorthernireland.com.
Firstly, I would just like to welcome everybody to this West Belfast Youth Talks Back event. My name's Chris Donnelly. It's quite unusual for me to be in the role as presenter, as chair. Normally, I'm one of the people slobbering on any panel, so I have to give that over to other people today. But I've known. Nevertheless, I was delighted to be asked to take this role. And what I want to do just to start is I want to introduce our panelists before we kick off and discuss some of the issues. So I'm going to start with Johnny McKenna. Johnny has been a member of the Féile youth subgroup for over a year now, has played a really positive role. He recently was successful with his application to 10 University in Liverpool to study sports studies. And congratulations to you, Johnny. He's just finished secondary school at Calas de Fursha. And he's currently playing for O'Donnell's senior Gaelic team and is a well-respected member of the club. So you're more than welcome, Johnny.
Thank you.
We also have Catherine Vaughan. Catherine works for Active Communities Network as a trainee youth and community worker. She attended St. Rose's Dominican College and Corpus Christi College, where she studied politics, health and social care, as well as travel and tourism. She previously worked with local politicians and alongside public achievement WIMPs and Belfast City Council's Youth Forum. So thank you, Catherine, for being with us. Danny Baker is here. Danny is the youth outreach worker, and of course, he's also a former mayor of Belfast from December 2019 to May 2020. And he is known for his infectious smile and his always positive attitude, which he brings to his role as a Sinn Féin councillor for the Colin area, where he famously, which he famously brought to the role of mayor during his tenure in office there. And even if you look at his Twitter handle, it's about being happy, isn't it, Danny? Being happy and positive, which I have to say I think is a great attitude and approach for local elected representatives to have. We also have Máire Thompson, who's no stranger to me. She's an inspirational school leader renowned across the city of Belfast and across the north for her can-do attitude and her capacity to motivate staff, parents and children alike. She won the prestigious Pearson Awards Head Teacher of the Year in 2017 in recognition for her work as principal then of Malone Integrated College. And of course, since then, she has moved to become the principal of Hazelwood Integrated College across town in North Belfast. But we won't hold that against her that she's left the West. And last but certainly not least, Chúrsaí Yusuma took up the appointment as Northern Ireland Commissioner for Children and Young People in March 2015. So she's been there over 6 years. Where did those years go, Chúrsaí?
I have no idea.
She trained as a social worker and previously worked in probation, Northern Ireland Women's Aid, and prior to her appointment was a director of Include Youth for almost 17 years. She regularly appears on radio and television, raising issues of concern on behalf of young people, and she is also a long-suffering Arsenal fan. But that is for another day. So you are all very welcome today. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to kick off, and just for the viewers' benefit, obviously this is not the traditional way that this discussion would be had. We live in pandemic times at the moment, so we're having to adapt, and this is being organized via Zoom. So we still wanted to encourage engagement. So ahead of this, Active Community Networks conducted surveys with young people on a range of questions, and then out of that they also from some of the children, young people, out of the findings of those survey questions, they elicited a number of questions, and those are the questions that some of those questions are what I'm going to put to our panelists. The first question, the first theme we're going to discuss relates to mental health issues, and from the survey that Active Communities Network had conducted, the result was that 75% of the young people surveyed believed that mental health issues were affecting the majority of people in their community, with 35% knowing someone who has lost their life to suicide. Now, that's more than 1 in 3 people. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to go to our panelists just to thrash that out, to discuss that. I want to start, if you don't mind, with each of our questions. I want to start with the young people who are the most important voices that we want to be hearing as part of this program. So, Johnny, if you don't mind, if I start with you, just what, that picture of 75% of young people believing mental health issues were affecting the majority of people in your community, and over 1 in 3 knowing personally someone who had committed suicide. What do you think are the main issues causing this?
Well, it's a scary thing to think about, like, and the causing the stuff. It's probably just being young. There's a lot of pressure on us nowadays, I believe, especially with school and stuff. Trying to just do well for yourself, it's hard, and especially nowadays, like during the hard times, it's trying to get out and get back to your normal life. It's especially being off a lot and stuck in the house doesn't help with your mental health, especially when you're allowed to go out with your friends and just do normal things. It had a really bad impact on other people. But I was fortunate enough not. Like, I have a good close group of friends, and I feel like we were always there to support each other in that way. But I know for other people, they're not as lucky, and it's hard.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, in terms of where you are at your age, Johnny, I mean, obviously this pandemic has come during really what are the golden years for kids in terms of their school life. When you're the eldest kids in a school, it normally, you have a sense of almost being on a par with teachers, of being kings of the castle, and all the things that normally would have happened in your A-level years. Obviously, a lot of that was denied to you. And was that something you felt yourself?
Yes, I know it was my last 2 years of school where it was really affected, but personally, I actually really enjoyed it, because I know you were kind of off school for a good bit, but going back and then seeing all your friends again and all your teachers, because personally, I feel in college first, our teachers are more of like, we're all on the same level, kind of. We all get along really well, and everything's very easy and not laid back. Like, we get our work done and all, but we're just on the same level, and going back and seeing everyone and just having a good crack for the last few months where we could have seen each other was really good.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It speaks great volumes about the culture and ethos of Colasta First as a school community, which it's renowned for. Catherine, if you don't mind if I come to you, just what are your thoughts on that? I mean, is that a picture that you would recognize about, that mental health, how detrimentally it's impacting upon young people during these times, particularly?
Yeah, well, I think Johnny, I had the opposite sort of experience to Johnny. My mental health deteriorated when we kind of went into the first lockdown. The uncertainty, the young people, like, it wasn't just adults that were uncertain of what was coming, it was the young people. And the misconceptions and all this advice that we were given, none of it really made sense. So people have just been, for the last almost 2 years, been trying to connect dots and trying to make sense out of the madness that we're in. And then obviously, like, the decline in mental health, I know I suffered greatly, and just getting myself back out there was a great struggle. But 75%, 1 in 3 people, they're really scary, statistics, and it is the reality of what young people are having to face today, which is the struggle to get themselves back out there again, to get themselves back out into education and employment, and things that are going to help them excel in their life, and not like let them like sit in this state of fear, almost to try and do something because of all the hardships we've kind of faced together. So I think all of us are probably feeling a bit of everything, rather than, we've all been kind of affected the same. So we all kind of know where we're all thinking, where all our heads are at. I think we're all just going to be happy to come out of it, and to come out of it a bit more positive about what's to come in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Catherine, if you don't mind me asking, did you feel alone during that, or were there people in your life for looking out for you who, helped you recognize that you were feeling down? Or
yeah, well, I actually, my father, I'm originally from Downpatrick originally, but I've spent the last 15, 16 years in the West, so I call that home now. But my dad, he was terminally ill, and he was a psychiatric nurse, and not having his support, because he would have been very good. I've never been through a pandemic up until this moment in my life, so I didn't really have as much guidance. So my sister was in Liverpool studying to become a nurse, so she was, on the front line of it, having to learn, and it was just me and my mum at home. So if it actually wasn't for my mum and the good few friends that I had, I probably wouldn't have made it out the pandemic, and that is the God honest truth. I think it's being able to have a conversation with people, even if it is hard, having that dialogue, keeping it open, and taking the kind of stigma away, because all of us do go through, whether it's just for a week or two, or it could be years, you go through, anxiety and depressions around, I think the pandemic made it sort of easier for people to kind of lock themselves away. And for me, it was very, easy to do that. But then I had to, tap back into reality, and kind of, negative mindset that I was in, and try and make it positive. Is with the situation we were all in, I kind of had to turn a negative into a positive, and I'm here today, so it worked out well.
Yeah, listen, I think that incredibly brave and a very honest contribution there, and it's really important that people do speak openly and honestly. It actually, when you say something like that, Catherine, you have no idea. Think of how many people maybe have the same experiences, but they won't articulate, they won't voice them, and maybe some people in their lives, just because of things that go on in people's lives, they miss it. They miss what goes on with their loved ones. So thank you very much for that. Danny, if you don't mind me coming to yourself, it's just as somebody who's well known in the West Belfast community, a very active local representative, how have is this a picture that you would recognize in the Collin area and other areas? Maybe you've been working as a youth work and as elected rep, and maybe how has it manifested itself, and maybe what have you seen at a local level initiatives, whether it's from organizations or whether it's from council or departments that have tried to put in place strategies to try to help people through this?
Oh, thanks, Chris. I would say even before the pandemic, we're all really bad at maybe expressing ourselves, all of us. And one of the reasons I get into becoming a councillor and taking on the role as a local activist, when you were talking and engaging with some of our young people, especially the ones who aren't involved in programs or hard to reach, they didn't feel part of the community. And then I think that's when social media really plays its part, where when things were going wrong in the community, whether it's a Collin or Lagmore or wherever, how quickly people turn to it to say someone may be a scumbag or whatever it is, and then pressures then build and manifest itself in the community. So it's important that we engage with all of our young people and give them a voice, because in my opinion, coming from a conflict, I grew up in it, and I'm glad to say the last generation to probably experience some of it, but we haven't dealt with it. My opinion is there's a lot of intergenerational trauma out there that's now manifesting itself in our young people. And when they are under pressures and we don't really know how to deal with it, and that's something that we all have to work together with, whether it's councils or youth clubs and all of that. And that's what we're doing here in Lagmore. We're putting so much emphasis as we can on our young people and trying to get as much investment in to get them in programs and keep working on that basis. We have a long way to go. The pandemic's made it a lot worse. You can see that with anxiety. Had that experience myself in my own house with my daughter. The anxiety going back to school at such a young age, I didn't even see it coming, and it floored me, if I'm being honest. And it's scary, and it's scary for all of our young kids. And it's definitely, for me, it's the pressures that they experience. Even though what we maybe came through, to what our young people have today, I think it's a lot harder to grow up in. Every single mistake they make is documented and kept and used against them. And to me, that's the scariest part, as if we can't make mistakes these days. I make mistakes every single day, but say if I had been probably growing up under social media back 20 years ago, like the rest of us, it probably be still haunting you today, some of the stuff, but we don't talk about it properly, and we're still a very much society that likes to maybe point a finger before they would put an arm around someone. So I think there's a lot of work needs done, and that goes from councils up the Stormont right along. Investment needed in our youth, in our education. Our teachers are brilliant. I know my kids go to the Irish medium education, and I see the difference from what I came through. I feel a more pastor care there. I could be across the board. I just how I feel with my own kids went through. And I think that's what more we need to be doing. We need to be putting more emphasis on ourselves and on our kids, and maybe less pressures on them. How we do that, we have to do it together.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Máire, just in terms of at the school end, how have what have you been seeing over the last 16, 17 months since the start of this pandemic in terms of mental health, and what's been manifesting itself, and maybe what have you been able to do, or what strategy have you tried to put in place within the school to help the young people through this?
First thing I'd like to say is I think our young people need to be commended. I think they've shown great resilience, and sometimes I think there's an expectation that we expect them to cope with things when they don't have the wealth of previous experience. So I'm in whatever age I am, and I have all these experiences that I can delve into, but they don't have them. They haven't experienced that yet. And sometimes we give them a hard time and say, well, they should be able to do this, that, and the other, when actually they're still learning from those experiences. when they came back, one of the best things I think which really helped us, when our students came back from the first lockdown, we undertook a wellbeing audit across the whole school, every single child. And we looked at the different levels. So we looked at some people that were experiencing a wee bit more levels of anxiety, some just a wee bit, and we put interventions in at every level. So it meant, so we're one of the only schools in the north to have qualified social workers. So we were really able to put our social workers in to work with anxiety and I suppose children experiencing trauma and to undertake programs with them. We had a range of external voluntary organisations in the community sector who came in, and I think it's important to recognise their role. We had a range of different people that come in, I think from the Prince's Trust to include youth, that there were so many that helped, and they come in because those external people know our children in the community and they know the families and they know a lot of the generational stuff, and they were able to engage on a, I suppose, a deeper level at times, and they were able to relate to things that were going on at home. So we had a range of different things. Unfortunately, we did have some attempted suicides. We had some high levels of, I suppose, instances of trauma, because not all children have the same personal circumstances at home. And unfortunately, for some of those vulnerable children whose parents are also struggling, they're watching their parents struggle, they're struggling. And sometimes people didn't realize the depth and the range of issues that were going on for some of those children at home. So we regularly, I mean, everybody in our school should have got phone calls on a regular basis. For those that we were worried about, we made home visits. We did all of that type of stuff. We put support in place post coming back. But I think one of the things which I was really focused on was putting the message of balance out there. The exams are important, but they're just exams. They'll come and they'll go. The most important thing for me is your happiness and your well-being. So if you push children to a point where you're so focused on exams and performance outcomes at this time, it's very difficult to get them back from that. So in our school, we were very focused on try your best. Try your best. If something doesn't work out, don't worry about it. We'll help you. We'll get through it. And I think that was the message consistently. I've one teenager, one at 20, and I was saying the same things to them. Try your best. Don't worry about it. And I also think we were also trying to encourage people to connect with friends and also to connect with something that they enjoy, whether that's sport, whether that's music, whether that's drama. I really think the community and the external extracurricular activities are so much more important now. Really, really, to get people out of the house, to get them out of maybe the same friendship groups and doing the same things. But I have to say it has been hard, but the resilience of the young people has been absolutely superb. And that's what has given, I suppose, us hope. At times we nearly expected them, oh God, we're going to be faced with this and this. The things that I would say is we expected a high degree of incidence when they come back. As we were leaving, in 1 month, we had our highest level of child protection and safeguarding issues in 1 month, 2 years nearly after it had started. So that was a wee worry for me in terms of me thinking potentially what's ahead. So I think going forward, we need to make sure there are appropriate resources and things in place to anticipate any problems that might emerge as we progress through this, as children become more comfortable in talking about what's ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Máire. I think you're right that there's never been greater recognition of the importance at a school level of planning for the pastoral care of children in the broadest possible way, the social emotional development of children and the physical development. I think that schools ensuring that PE, children provided with PE opportunities as often as possible, just to get out of the classroom, to engage with one another, to have those experiences. And I definitely think that's going to be something that's going to continue in the time ahead, because we don't know how quickly we're going to come out of this, regardless. Just on yourself, Cuala, because obviously within your remit as the Commissioner for Children and Young People, strategically, at a government level, what do you think should be a focus for our executive, our local politicians, to put this into a more overarching strategic vision? What do they need to be doing? Because obviously all of these anecdotes and observations that we have are what people are facing and dealing with almost sometimes reactively. Yeah. But where we need to try to make the difference is thinking proactively from the top down, and that has to come from a political leadership.
Yeah, and so I was ready to give you all inspirational stuff about how great our kids are, but you're now asking me to give you inspirational stuff about how great our government is. That's quite a tough ask. So you're absolutely right. So all these experiences and all this knowledge that we're getting on the ground, you know, the survey that Hazelwood did, what Johnny's saying, what Catherine's saying, what active communities are saying, you know, that the young people that from Colin that Danny works with, all of that has to be taken into account by the people who make the decisions around spending, who make the decisions about the policies and the laws that we have, and that's really important. Now, I actually think, you know, you said, Chris, I've been commissioner for 6 years. Mental health, our children's mental health and wellbeing was an issue 6 years ago and a lot longer. It was a priority when I became commissioner. We've already done a lot of work. So strategically, it was a priority, but we could never clearly articulate it. What this pandemic has taught us is how important schools are as a safety net for our children, how important friendships are as a safety net for our children, how important seeing our children and their families on a daily and regular basis is really important. And you've said it as well, how important leisure and sporting and artistic and cultural activities are to the health and well-being of our children. But the other big thing, and we've seen it in the conversation today, is that let's not assume we know, because I don't think any two children and young people have experienced this pandemic or mental health and well-being in the same way. You know, we've already heard from Johnny and Catherine, two quite different experiences. So it's brilliant to hear that Hazelwood asked each child, how are you? What's been going on for you? So who are the ones we need really, really targeted particular services? And who are the ones we just need to look after, keep an eye on, but normality, whatever that may be, will actually support them. So at a strategic level, we have to support those services on the ground. We have to say, here is the money for the community and voluntary sector and communities themselves to do it for themselves, because that's really, really important. But here is also supports and resources and funding for the child and adolescent mental health services for those young people who are most poorly, because we also need to get services to them. But also, these are the good services. These are the services that we know will address this issue, that issue, whatever issue. Because at the moment, what's really worrying me is everybody's saying we're experts in providing a service to young people and emotional and mental health and well-being. And actually, I'd like to see where they get that word expert in their jobs. And I think we need a lot of work from government, working with communities about who are the good providers, because I'm a little bit worried about that as well. So I actually think with this Minister for Health and the mental health champion and the strategy that we've got in place, I am more optimistic, dare I say, than I have ever been around a way forward for our children's mental health and well-being. I'm not saying the mountain's not huge, absolutely is, and we're only at base camp, but I am optimistic. And I just want to say one thing about, not so about resilience, and about who the people are who have kept this on the agenda in a really vibrant way, and that's young people themselves. So, you know, whether, you know, it's Johnny and Catherine, but all I have to do is switch on my social media and think, I don't know why I'm in this job, because there are hundreds of young people out there who are standing up, demanding their rights and saying, we will not go away until you do better by us. And I just think, sit back cooler, support them and make sure that they listen to, because those young people are brilliant. That it makes me sad that they have to do it, but isn't it amazing that they are able to? And our job as adults is to make sure that we can provide those frameworks to enable them to do that. Sorry, Chris, that was a bit of a speech, but it's so important that we can talk about this stuff.
Yeah, just finally on this, because I want to come back to you, Johnny, because Kula used a word which I think is so important in any time we're having this discussion on mental health, and that's resilience. And it's a thing we come back to. And within schools, from primary to post-primary, we know the importance of discussing that theme, but actually explaining and articulating its meaning to children, making it relevant to them. You know, within my own schools in John the Baptist, our motto is aspire, believe, achieve. And you talk to children through what that means. that mean they do well in their spelling tests, and you get praise for them out of it, or playing for a sports team, the team wins, or even the team loses, but they've done so well. And I just wanted to come back to you, Johnny, because I know that, a big part of your identity about who you are is sport. The team you play for, the study, where you're going to study in university, and just how important is that to you as a person? And really, how do you think that maybe sport has made you, or has it, developed you as a more resilient person because of your experiences?
Yes, I would agree, because obviously when I wasn't able to play sport there, because of the lockdowns, it was hard to keep yourself motivated to do stuff. You were just obviously stuck in the house, but more support from the school. You were told to do your work, but on top of that, you were said to go out, go on a walk, just get out of the house and appreciate what you have around you. And especially with sport, not being able to see your mates and who you're usually playing against and alongside, it was hard. But once that stuff came back about, it was good to be back in. But obviously losing, it's a part of the game, which is a good thing, because you need to have that resilience in your life to keep yourself pushing forward. And you're not going to win you're not going to win all the time. So I think you just need to be more resilient, and just to see the positive side of stuff. It's always a learning curve. What I take from it, you're always going to learn from stuff, and sport is a big part of my life. It's probably the main, I'd say it's my main priority, just is Gaelic, just to have more fun playing with my mates and just enjoying it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thanks very much for that. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. It's an issue, and again, it was one of the questions that Active Communities Network had put in their survey to young people. And the response was that 22% of young people surveyed said they had experienced or had seen someone from the LGBT community being bullied or picked on. And I just want to come to you, Catherine. I mean, to me, that is almost an extraordinary. And one level, I think, if you go back to my age, when I was a child, I would have expected it to be much higher than that, to be honest, even though the way that disparaging jokes and comments would have been much more mainstream. Mm-hmm. But I suppose in culture, the culture that we live in now, I found that to be a bit of a shock that it was that high. And I just wonder, in terms of your own experience, would that be a reflection of what you would see out there, Catherine?
Yeah, so I wasn't a part of the survey, but as a part of the LGBTQ plus community, I firsthand experience it on a regular basis. So I know that it isn't as shocking enough. Maybe to you guys it's shocking, but to me it's not. On a regular basis. I don't want to, because the names and the stuff it's disgusting. But in terms of young people facing it on a regular basis, it is hard. But us as ourselves as queer young people have problems identifying with our own sexuality and the changes that we go through as individuals, as human beings. And it is really hard because, me, again, I'm kind of burning it all today to using, but internalized homophobia was something that I had with myself. I had so many issues myself trying to come to terms with my own sexuality. So to get it off members of the public, random members of the public, or whoever they are, it's really disheartening. It's really discouraging. It makes people not feel like this is a safe enough space for their voices. Like, if everyone else can be acknowledged for who they are, why can't we be acknowledged for who we are? The only difference is we love who we love, and that is the only difference really that there is. So there isn't much difference between me and any normal other person. It's the issues that we face and we feel. You shouldn't have these issues in 2021. I don't believe I should, but unfortunately that's the case today. Yeah,
absolutely. Johnny, would this be a picture that you recognize? I mean, did that figure surprise you? 22% of young people experiencing or had seen someone from the LGBTQ plus community being bullied or picked on?
Oh, it's not surprised. It doesn't surprise me that is going on, and of course you do see it. But I don't for me. I don't know. I just let people be who they want to be. I don't know why it should bother. It shouldn't bother me that someone wants to be what they want. I don't know why it bothers other people, because it doesn't affect my life how someone else expresses himself, and that should be the way it should be. And of course you see it out and about. I don't know, it's nothing obviously I face, but it's hard to see other people.
It's hard seeing it happening to other people. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Máire, if you don't mind, if I come to you, Máire, just because I know that in your role as a principal of the school, you had, I mean, first of all, if you don't mind explaining to people, you had brought in the Rainbow Project to work with the children and staff. Was it in the school a few years ago?
Yes, we had a student came out and said, look, I would like, my experience and the LGBTQ community to become more, I suppose, embedded in school culture. So we invited the Rainbow Project in to do some work at all levels. But in my current school, we have a very prominent group called Gay, Straight, Whatever. So they, and that group's made up of staff who are gay and who are out. And that's also made up of students. They attend Pride every year. They're very vocal. They go to the assemblies. They work at different year groups from year 8 all the way out. Some children feel confident coming out at an earlier age, some don't. I do think there's still a phobia around. I mean, we've transgender toilets and we've all of that, and we talk through that, and that's embedded in the curriculum across the school, but it's also something that's presented at assemblies on a regular basis, and obviously they attend lots of different things. But I do think there's still a stigma in some schools around the whole, I mean, for me, your sexuality doesn't define you. You define you and your personality and the person that you are. But in some places, I would still come across children who would say that in some schools, it's nearly like a dirty word to say, I'm gay, or, I'm transgender, or and there's not that level of openness or support. And it's something that people feel very uncomfortable with. For me, it's got to be, I'm trying to make it, as common to be gay as what it is to be straight. In our school, you are what you are, and that has to be something that's, explained, something that, children need also to be educated. They also need to be educated around the experiences and the hardships that some of our LGBT community experience, because if they don't understand that, then they might think that some of the things that they do is okay. So this whole, you're gay, as a slagging around somebody, the people think, oh, but that's only a slagging. We would drill right down into terminology, usage of words, how you say, how you make people feel, throwaway comments, all of that stuff. So I think actually it needs to be something that's prominent across all schools in terms of how it's taught. There needs to be support groups. And I'm not going to say where, but someone was telling me in a school that they had the self-esteem group, and the self-esteem group was maybe some of the, the gay students. I was like, what? So there's still some stigma around coming out. And I think we as educators need to promote it. We need to take away the stigma. We need to embrace it. We need to ensure that our LGBTQ plus even community are integrated across the school, even in the leadership roles. So our leadership roles in our school, are made up of the best people, irrespective of their sexuality, and our LGBT community are embedded in that, and we're very proud that they take a very prominent role in leadership. But that has to be something that's got to be replicated across all schools, and it's something that has to be, that schools need to be proud of. I don't care what their sexuality is. I care about what they're like and the things that they do and the contributions that they can make. But there still is a role around educating people who maybe arrive with preconceptions based on something that they've experienced in the community or something at home. And I also think, as a person who has members of my family who are members of it, when you hear about what they've experienced, I think there's an onus on school leaders to make sure that we're really, really making a difference in this area, so that those experiences don't become something that continue on for generations. Yeah.
Cúla, would that compliment? I mean, would that be a picture that you have very much got working across schools and within society for years?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I thought 22% was really low. I was surprised it was as low as 22%, so that gave me some optimism. 22% too many, absolutely. But it gave me a little bit of optimism. And talking about Rainbow, they did a piece of work for the Department of Education, 2017, I think it was, that talked about young people's experiences in school. And they talked about being bullied. They talked about not being able to be their true selves. They talked about mental health issues. Now, the high levels of mental ill health amongst our LGBT community is nothing to do with the fact that, you don't get poorly because you're LGBT. It's because of the way you are treated by people outside of the system. And just very quickly about schools, the fact that relationship and sexuality education does not have a compulsory and mandatory curriculum in Northern Ireland allows some schools to pretend that they don't have any children who are LGBTQ plus, and so they deny their existence at the very best. Others who may talk about our church doesn't promote this, and then we have an increasing numbers of schools who are celebrating and are promoting really inclusive communities and are supporting young people, straight or gay and queer, to be able to stand up and say we're not having this. And it's simple things like not even saying to a little girl, "Oh, do you have a boyfriend?" or just to say, is there somebody you like? And letting them say, actually, I like that girl over there, and being okay with that. So for me, we need to send a very clear message. And our government, talking about my job, our government needs to introduce mandatory, compulsory relationship and sexuality education that is inclusive of our LGBTQ plus young people. And also, just moving this on a little bit, talks about consent and reminds us what a healthy sexual relationship, particularly for our young people as they are developing as sexual beings. And let's not pretend our older young people are not sexual beings, because they are. And we need to support them to have a healthy relationship and understanding with themselves and with whoever it is that they are attracted to. So that is the big thing for me. But the other big thing is the political discourse. So we our kids, and is it any wonder they replicate that in the playground? Our kids are still to this day hearing some political leaders say, I have nothing against them, but I don't agree they should be allowed to be married, or I don't agree. What's that all about? That is not that in my view is inappropriate speech, and we need to get away from that. We need never ever to have any child or young person sitting in their bedroom thinking that they're less than another one. And to hear anything from political commentators and leaders in our community, or faith leaders in our community, making them feel like that is inappropriate, and I would ask them to desist from such language. Yeah. I'm quite neutral on this.
Yeah, no, well, I was going to say, Kula, that unfortunately they've heard some of our political elected representatives say a lot worse than even what you were implying there. Just from my own experience, Danny, before I come to you, the reason I'd said I was kind of surprised that it was at 22% is my experience with young people, my own children who are of secondary school age, and many of their friends network.
Far more accepting, yeah.
They are incredibly, I would say that Pride would be, the amount of teenagers from across all schools look forward to Pride to go and be in supportive of the LGBT community is phenomenal across every community.
My children went to Pride before I did, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's why I'd kind of thought, now again, I suppose at 22% it is entirely unacceptable, and we want to get that down, but it's, I suppose be the experience of all of us who are older, and Johnny and Catherine here, is that unfortunately 20 years ago it would have been even much higher. And Danny, I would have maybe bring you in just in terms of the, what have you noticed, Danny, over maybe as your time as an elected rep, even how discourse has changed within the local community, or how you've worked in support of LGBT individuals and groups, over that period of time?
Yeah, I've seen a huge difference in that, and I put it down to our young people, and society moves quicker than politicians on many issues, and this for me particularly, marriage equality. It was a cornerstone of equality, and one that myself and our party were fighting for. Within our own community in Lagmore, over the last year through the Lagmore Youth Project, we have an LGBTQ inclusive growth group, and I think it's fantastic, because I've even noticed that we've got 18 members. I see them now throughout the community express themselves more than what I would have maybe 2 years ago, and that to me is a telling difference. They're comfortable being in the community, which they should be, and we shouldn't be leaving any of our young people behind. But there's more of these programs we need to be having through, whether it's through schools or through youth clubs or whatever. We need to be allowing them that space to grow and be comfortable and support them. But a lot of this comes from how we conduct ourselves as well as politicians at all levels. I was proud that the second the motion of Mary Allen's a number of years ago when we put the rainbow flag up in City Hall. And to me, it's that solidarity that is huge, and we need to keep doing that. We have the trans flag every year nagging up. I was through the Green Party brought that through, and I think that's fantastic. You know, growing up to me, City Hall was a bastion of unionism. It's no longer that. And the more, I suppose, inclusiveness we have within local government and then more up in Stormont, we need to see more changes up there as well through all political parties. I think that will help. And just us. Recently, we done the parade run up here in Lagmore, and it was a huge success. Our whole community came out and participated in it, and I thought that was fantastic. And that was down to the great work being done by that inclusive group that we have in Lagmore. They organised it and they done it, and there was hundreds of people came out that night and showed that support. And I think that's more and more that I could do as a youth leader or as a local councillor. I think that's really important. It's just about giving people that strength and determination to, to stand up, and because they are facing it. I know 22%. It did surprise me a wee bit, but then in another regard, it doesn't, because it is very easy to pick on people if you think they're a wee bit weaker than you. I think that's still there in our society, whether that's racism, anti-gay, whatever you want to say it. We're going to talk about sectarianism next. Plays a wee part in it and all as well. So I think the more that we can do as leaders, the better, and just keep moving forward.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I have to say, I think it's fantastic and heartening to hear that group exists within the Lagmore community. And as you say, it's about empowerment and those people feeling a sense of confidence to contribute, and also changing perceptions for some locally, which is absolutely crucial. It only adds the diversity, the richness of the local community, and it is about changing the dialogue, changing the vocabulary. Sometimes you're right, unfortunately, particularly around young people. It's not just exclusively young people, but it becomes, and we know this in schools, it's very easy for children to pick on one another. They'll find something that separates that child out. And often kids aren't bad. They'll make bad decisions. They'll make poor choices. It's how we as adults, how we react, how we tell them that's not acceptable. It's not acceptable to use that terminology. It's not acceptable to pick on somebody because they're different. And of course, further to Keola's point earlier, if unfortunately the adults in the room or the society are not establishing the right parameters, are not actually saying that that's the wrong thing to be saying, but worse, are actually indulging that and leading that, well, then we're to blame for the mistakes and the children are making, and the fact that those mistakes get perpetuated maybe into the next generation. And that helpfully leads into the next question that the Active Communities Network had taken up with young people. And the finding of the question was that 26% of young people stated they feel like the older generation is a source of sectarianism in Northern Ireland, and they wouldn't have the views they did if it wasn't for the generation before. Now, in one sense, I think that's probably a bit low of a figure, that it's only 26%. But I think it is a fascinating question, and it's a bit of an elephant in the room of our society that needs to be addressed. And if it is the case that 26, I personally think that it should be a lot higher percent. What do we need to do? I mean, firstly, if I come to yourself, Catherine, first, what is your experience with regard to sectarianism? Do you think that a lot of the problems for what you might see and hear from young people your age around you, your network, or maybe others that you would hear and see, comments that they make that maybe would depress you, that maybe you wouldn't agree with, do you think that's anchored in the experiences and prejudices of the older people in their lives?
Yeah, well, I definitely think when I was with Belfast City Youth Forum, it was in 2017, 2018, we did do a survey, and it was a lot higher than the percentage active communities got. It was nearly 63%. I think that everyone agreed that they either followed in the footsteps of their grandparents or their parents in terms of when it came to voting around elections, who they were for were based on what their parents basically were them to, if someone was from the Shankill DUP, their parents voted DUP, they were DUP. Me, on the other hand, my mummy and daddy let me, pick my own opinion when I was from Downpatrick, as I said. So Downpatrick is quite neutral. You have a bit of both. Everywhere you go, you can walk into one Catholic street, and down the street you're walking into a Protestant street. but I was reared in the West as well. So I was able to form my own opinion quite young. And I was one of them kids in school. People annoyed me because they always knew I was out like canvassing, lobbying, doing leaflet drops. I was one of them ones that it was easy to pick on me because it was a huge interest I had. But I was lucky that I was able to base my own opinions myself without my parents. Now, don't get me wrong, my daddy was a bit older than my mum, so his opinion was a wee bit more outdated, and he kind of wanted me to stay in his parameters of how he thought. But the older I got, he kind of knew that I was stuck in my ways about what my thoughts and belief systems were. And he eventually says, you know, it's not a phase no more. You know, you're inclined to, you know, believe and do whatever you want to do. And, you know, I was really thankful that my mummy and daddy didn't force anything down my throat. I was able just to, you know, look at a party, and if the manifesto and their agendas, what their policies, if they were for me, that's what I identified with. So I don't think I had a bad experience per se, but I do know that sectarianism, especially in the West, there can be a lot of it all the time. But I think it is pretty much starts at home. You know, what you're kind of taught from an early age at home, it kind of all begins and starts there. So what you do with that information when you leave your home every single day is entirely on you as an individual. Whether you're, you know, beaming positivity that you're all for peace and reconciliation, or you're, you know, you're being ignorant to someone on the other side, it's all down to the person that's out putting themselves down there. And I think I hate the word tolerant, but I believe that is exactly what needs to be. There needs to be a lot more tolerance for everyone just to sit down and have a civil conversation and just get their opinions out there. And that's really what it is.
Okay, that's great. Johnny, what experiences would you have in that regard? Would you agree with that sentiment? Do you think that, you know, young people, any sectarianism you might hear, do you think it's really rooted in what those kids young people might have heard from the parents and others within their own community, passing it down to them?
Yeah, so yes, I would say so, because I believe like a good few parents nowadays have an old school kind of look on things, and I believe it's still the same way it was 40 years ago. And that I don't know, I feel like some people are hard to get past that. And especially like a lot of youth groups around Belfast doing cross-community work, I believe it really helps. But like living on the Falls Road, you do see the sectarianism going on, especially not that long ago. You had Larnack Way, all the riots going over there. And honestly, I couldn't tell you what that was about. It was just, it seemed kind of out of the blue for me. And then I know it's hard, like, especially like parents, like my parents saying, be careful where you're going, like watch what you're doing, especially like we're in a Gaelic top in certain areas. I have to watch where I'm going before I can go in there without affecting someone just because of what I'm wearing, which shouldn't be a problem. I don't believe it. It is a problem now, but I don't understand why, because I know other people don't affect me because what their rights and beliefs are. It should be a community thing, and once more stuff happens where we are taking part in things together, it will be better.
Yeah, of course. I'm gonna talk to the, want of a better term, older people in the discussion here. I'll throw myself into that mix too, because I know I'm certainly not the youngest of the older people here. But one way, I mean, when we're talking about sectarianism being passed down, doesn't necessarily mean passing down identity is a bad thing, obviously, because any of the likes, I mean, whether, you know, Kula is a football fan of a team, it's the most natural thing for your child to be kitted out in the same team that you want, you know.
They refuse. I did that, and they refused to support them when they had a choice. Do you see? When they were babies, I had them kitted out. And it didn't work for me.
Perhaps that's a case of making a wise choice. But what I was going to say is I would use this anecdote quite a bit, because I think it's really a telling one about how people like us, maybe who were alive and living during the worst maybe years or years of the Troubles, how it shapes your thoughts. And I remember, never forget, I used to teach in Holy Cross Boys in North Belfast in Ardougne, and I remember driving up the Crumlin Road from Carlisle Circus and seeing a couple of kids walking up from St Malachy's up the Crumlin Road, up the Old Park Road to get home. And my first thought was, these children are in danger, because the experiences that I had many years ago would have been that you wouldn't have walked the straightest, the shortest route, because it was going through an area that would have been deemed to be maybe dangerous for the children. Now, that was me. In one sense, these kids are obviously doing that quite regularly. And it's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing that they are not shackled by my perceptions, that they don't have those experiences to call upon, those bad experiences that in a sense define me as a person. They don't have those. And really, whilst obviously there's always, as a parent, as an adult, you want to, and as Johnny alluded to, he's being told by parents, don't be wearing that top going here and there. And sometimes that's just common sense. Unfortunately, I would say that to my own child at times. At other times, maybe that we're passing something down, like an example I'm given, where it's a great thing that a child doesn't have the bad experiences to call upon. And, you know, it's a bit of a balance for us. I mean, that those are the more, but I'm even talking at the benign end of passing down almost unconsciously a degree of bias. There's obviously much worse things can be said. But what, you know, if I come to you first, Máire, I mean, what's your thoughts on this in terms of the generational attitudes perhaps that are being passed down that we need to work on addressing as a society?
I would still say there is a degree of sectarianism that is passed generationally down to children, and children sometimes come out with things and they don't even realize what they're saying. And sometimes there's an expectation actually that schools, I mean, I obviously lead an integrated school, and we do a lot of work around tolerance and, you know, acceptance of other people's beliefs. But we're not there to make sure that somebody coming from a Catholic area doesn't call somebody, you know, I don't know, an orangey or a teig, or, you know, they go there, you go to your integrated school. Actually, we have them X amount of hours per day, and the home environment in the community, you know, can provide a very different experience for our young people. So I think it's really, really important as educators and as parents, just to continue to promote children having a range of different experiences from people of lots of different cultures, and being open not just to the sectarian nature, but just what we talked about, being open about sexuality, being open about, you know, single parent families, poverty. That would be my sort of take on it. But I do think there's still a generation, an older generation filled, post-generation from troubles, filled with, I suppose, elements of toxicity and hate. I mean, I'm from a Catholic area in West Belfast, and I would still, you know, I have experienced people say things about where I'm from, and based on where I'm from, that would maybe dictate my perception and things, when actually, like, I've been immersed in sport my whole life, with people, worked with people cross community. I actually went on a cross community trip when I was 14 with a girl from the Shankill who's now working in not what do you call not the Irish language, the Ulster Scots. So, you know, I have been immersed in those type of experiences from a young age, and that was something that my parents, particularly my father, promoted around, you know, getting involved in things, getting to know people from different backgrounds. But I do think it's very prevalent, and sometimes the good thing about where I work in the integrated sector is children then come in and meet people from different backgrounds and realize that some of the prejudice, maybe not from their own parents, but from other people that they meet and other people in the community, is not true. And that lived experience allows them to take a completely different direction. And we have so many examples of that, of children. You know, Marion, actually my sister's best friend, went to school when I was at Malone, and her and her husband married from school, both members of different members of the community. And there's been a whole series of examples of all of that, of friendships straddling that. So I do think, you know, lived experiences can help that. But unfortunately, when I look at some of the stuff that some of the generational people are putting on, I tend, because of my role, not to comment on sectarianism, politics, or anything like that. But when I get on Twitter and I look at some of the things, I actually could cry at the level of toxicity around comments from about children and communities and whatever. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is depressing. So I wish there was like a wee filter button where you could go, right, I don't see that, only positivity and only stuff that's not really sectarian. But unfortunately, because of where we live, because of what's gone on before, because of where we currently are politically, I do think that there are still underlying seeping, I suppose, past experiences of people who are passing them on to their children, and potentially they're not getting the vast range of educational, lived and personal experiences to allow them to know any different.
Yeah, Danny, just as thanks more for that. Danny, just as an elected representative, I mean, obviously, because we know there's a problem there, and it's not going away, but what proactive initiatives that would you like to see, or have you seen within your own local area that's about, the children, young people from the Colin community, from Lagmore? Because obviously Lagmore would be regarded as overwhelmingly maybe nationalist community residing there. And obviously that issue of segregation in terms of housing, and it's very much a voluntary segregation, people making choices in that regard. But what initiatives maybe exist, or would you like to see put in place that would help to confront the attitudes that maybe get passed down generationally to younger children?
Well, I suppose from my own experience, Chris, I would say that, passed down, in my own experience, I've passed down to me was republicanism. And to me, that was about going out and helping whatever way you can for your community. That's what was instilled in me from my parents. And I get a wee bit frustrated as a councillor sometimes, I think, because yes, in Lagmore and Colin, probably because of the boundary we live on, we don't really have that sectarian sort of element that comes and rears its head. I think there would be other issues. But I see it within council sometimes where we can really be working well together. And then I think sometimes there is an element within all political parties, not excluding my own, but in all political parties where we start playing these wee games and you use a green and orange card when it's not really the case. It's a narrative, and it's an easy narrative. And I think that's unfair on society. I've said this for a long time, that a lot of what impacts our communities, especially working class ones, watching the fall through the Shankill, are the exact same. There's a big massive wall that divides our communities. That doesn't happen in BT9 or other well-to-do areas right across the north. And that to me is a big problem. We need to be creating opportunities for working class kids. And, it is the working class Protestant boys who are falling behind the most. And we need strong unionist political leaders. But we also need the other political parties not to be jumping on things either and saying things like political carve-ups and that sort of narrative. To me, that frustrates me, because we're trying to work really hard against bonfires. You see it while it's in August. You're trying to change the element within July without taking away anybody's identity, but it's about making it safer. And I think the investment needs to go into these areas without any sort of commentary coming from other middle ground parties saying that it's a political carve-up when it suits them. That to me is frustrating as a councillor. I see that. As someone within my young community, I don't experience sectarianism. And I think that's probably just because of where I am sitting, that there's no real sort of interface. And I think we create the interfaces because we've kept the walls up. We haven't went far enough since the Good Friday Agreement, and that's failure on everybody. And I think we need to keep working harder. I do get depressed when I see Twitter as well. There's a lot of commentators, what a way of calling them, maybe not politically elected or may not have a mandate, but certainly have a big following. And when I hear that they want to pull down the Belfast Agreement or the Good Friday Agreement and walk away from it, that to me is really depressing, because I am the last generation who should experience what we experience. I didn't know nothing different between a Catholic or a Protestant growing up. What I did know was the difference that there was Saracens coming up and down my street, that there was homes being raided in my street, that there was children being shot dead in my street. That's what I grew up. That's what I remember. And we should never go there again. And we won't, because we all have to keep working hard. But I do feel that there's a bigger part for everyone to be playing, and sometimes politics is just getting in the way of it, and we need to just keep pushing on. And the more society and our young people, I encourage them, keep voting, make sure you're registered, because you are the ones who are going to bring about change. That's how you get it, because I don't think our young ones, I think can move far further than us. And I don't believe sectarianism is passed through every generation. I know there's a lot of hurt still out there. And I touched on it earlier on about intergenerational trauma. I think we need to be concentrating on that as well. PTSD for other communities. There's a lot of work needs to be done. But I think a lot of good people out there trying to make a difference, and I think we will come through it.
Yeah, I suppose I wanted to tie that before I come to you, Kula, I think this one kind of ties in with the last question. I definitely would have thought 20, 30 years ago, homophobic comments would have been, in a shaming way for society, would have been more mainstream and more acceptable within Northern Irish society. Even racist comments, I can recall people making comments where, I mean, I moved as a young lad from America here, and I was shocked the first few years that people just openly would have used terms that just weren't acceptable where I was growing up in Phoenix, Arizona. And I just think that, would it be, I mean, certainly I would think that our children and young people, their attitudes, whilst obviously, I mean, this said 26% of young people believe older generation would be the source of sectarianism. I definitely think that I definitely would pick up that there wouldn't be, the abusive terminology that would have been mainstream, that would have been used to describe the others in our society, whether they were Protestant or whether they were Catholic or whether they were minority communities or whether they were gay and lesbian community. I think our society has advanced. This generation of young people are certainly in a much better place than we were. But Kula, just coming on to you, because obviously if we're, and Danny's right, it's obviously there's a place for everybody. But if you're thinking strategically from, if you're championing young people and you're thinking towards the next generation below them, those kids who are coming through the doors of my school into primary one, born, my God, almost 20 years after the Good Friday Agreement, after it, where's next? What do we need next to be, really proactively pushing in a direction that'll challenge all of us?
I think these are really important questions, and I just want to reiterate something Danny said about today's children, particularly children living in those areas. A lot of them in West Belfast who were affected by the conflict are in a different way, but are children of the Troubles. They're still living the impact of the conflict, and this sectarian thing is also an issue. I think we went through a phase where I began to think we're beginning to lift from this idea of Catholic or Protestant or, to be identified in that way. But Brexit and some of the conversations around Irish language have retracted and not brought us all the way back, but have actually not helped. Brexit isn't a green or orange issue. Irish Language Act isn't a green or orange issue. It's about a rights issue. And people who are trying to put it in that way are trying to pull us back. The other thing to say is I came to Northern Ireland, obviously I'm not from here. I came to Northern Ireland first in 1990 and moved in 94 to do cross-community holidays, to do those, bringing kids together on interfaces. Had the best time and found myself a husband and brought the husband from Turf Lodge to Bangor. Everybody cared how he was coping with the transition, not how I cope with the transition. So I understand that now. But I do want to say a couple of things, and you said it, Chris. So let's talk about Turf Lodge, where my husband's from. Children in Turf Lodge are described as Catholic, Nationalist, Republican. Don't give a political opinion. To telling children, because they were brought up on Norglen Parade, that they are a nationalist or Republican. We are putting these labels on them before we are asking them. We are supporting them to make these decisions. So, the chances are they're Catholic, very good chance that they're raised in the Catholic faith, which is great. But being nationalist or Republican or unionist or loyalist is a choice you make, hopefully based on information that you receive. And we need to move away as a society. And that's some of the conversations we've been having with government officials. Similarly, we've talked about education. Maura's right, education won't fix it. We have segregated housing. We also have the communities most impacted by the conflict are our poorest communities, are our communities that are blighted by poverty and economic deprivation and all those other things, and we've talked about suicide and drug and alcohol use and all those things. And these things have to go hand in hand. And we do need to move towards our children living in the same communities and our children being educated together and being open about having those conversations in schools about why their parents are sectarian, about why they're still living the trauma of their families. And I want to say one thing, and it was as Catherine was speaking that made me think about this, and it's more of an optimistic note. I think if we lower the voting age to 16, we will have a very, very different outcome. And
100%. I was actually a part of, it was a project called Rock the Vote.
Yes.
And So I was actually a part of that.
Absolutely.
Had the privilege of going down to Dublin, down to Ballymun, which has high levels of deprivation, very similar to the West. And just going down and having them open conversations with them kids who weren't able to vote, who were adamant that they wanted to make change but just couldn't. You know, there was some cases over in England where 16, 17-year-olds were given the opportunity to vote on referendums over there. Why can't it be the exact same over here?
Scotland, absolutely. Scotland and Wales.
Yep, there would be so much more social change if young
agree.
people were given the opportunity.
And what matters, what's important, maybe refocus a little bit on young people. I know as rapidly becoming an older person, because older people vote more, some of those issues get more prevalence. So there's a lot. I mean, I could go on and on as could we all about this. We are in a much better place than when I first came to Northern Ireland in 1990. It's a much better place. The Northern Ireland that my children have been raised in are very different from the Northern Ireland their father was raised in, and it's on the backs of all of you lot that today's society is better and safer for our children. And Dan has described what was going on, but we must continue to progress, and we need to stop people who are trying to pull us back.
Absolutely. Listen, folks, we're going to end it on that very positive note. I just want to thank all the panelists again, and hope you enjoy the rest of the summer that you've got here. And I also want to thank Active Communities Network for their role in supporting Féile and Phobail, and Joe Harold, particularly at Féile and Phobail, for putting this together. So thank you one and all. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.